One of the trends that I have seen since the 1960s in the church, when this whole idea of generation gaps kicked in, is the idea that different generational groups have to be targeted in different ways in terms of mission and ministry. So we see the concept of church planting around young people today. We see youth churches or youth-oriented churches, networks and ministries that are particularly centered around young people. Now, on one level, reaching young people is perfectly okay. It's absolutely fine. Because, Jesus said, "Let the children come to me." There was a particular heart that he had for the very young. But I have a slight issue if that divorces young people too much from the generation of their parents and their grandparents, because the biblical tradition on the whole, through Old and New Testaments, is about succession, is about learning from one's elders. It's about passing on the deposit of the faith, the good news of Jesus Christ for Christians. We see that continuity of generations around the extended families that are the basis for some of the churches in the New Testament, like Lydia's church, for example, is a house church. Stephanus and the jailer and so forth. These are likely to be churches which feature not just a nuclear family, but an extended family of cousins and grandparents and great-grandparents. And there's a sense in Timothy's story, Paul writing to Timothy, of how he has inherited faith from his elders. The elders lay hands on Timothy. Nobody's to look down on him because he's young, but he has to learn from those in the previous level of the family tree. Okay? So I do think that it's perfectly okay to prioritize mission, and going right back into the 19th century, that prioritization was often around young people. So the Young Men's Christian Association, the whole Scripture Union movement, they have their roots in the Victorian age in Britain. And latterly, the whole Youth for Christ movement that Billy Graham was part of. Well, the clue's in the name, Youth for Christ, after the Second World War, founded in 1946. But I think that these earlier movements are all about integrating young people into the life of an intergenerational church. I think sometimes the church has been too ready to assimilate that marketing, advertising-driven discourse of very hard distinctions between different target markets. Gen X like this, millennials like this, they'll buy this, they'll buy that. And we've kind of imported that a little bit too much sometimes, I think, into the way that we segment ministry and mission. And the problem is that you might create a church community for 20-somethings, but they're going to have kids, many of them. They're going to grow old, okay? So do you want a church that grows old in one narrowly defined cohort? Or do you want ultimately those young people that you may have specifically targeted for ministry to assimilate? It seems to me the biblical model is one of assimilation around a multi-generational church, an intergenerational family, and a cross-generational society.